Hello and welcome to the Crashsune Podcast, the show where we talk about awesome art with awesome artists. Today, I am lucky enough to have Dylan Goo on the show. Dylan, how is it going?
It's going good. Thanks for having me, dude. This is great.
Yeah, of course. I've been a huge fan of your work, and I love to see like what the studio puts out. It's so cool to me. So, yeah.
Thank you.
So before we even get into questions, I just wanted to make sure that because probably knowing my audience, I'm sure like most people here know who you are, but just in case they don't, Dylan, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so I am an animator. I'm also the founder of Dillon Goo Studios, where I'm a director and a bunch of other things. But basically, we run a YouTube channel called Dylan Goo, GOO, and that is sort of my main focus. We've been working on the YouTube channel for quite a while, and we've been making a bunch of random videos here and there. But the main idea is really to get something that is special. With the studio, that our main goal is to get something that is like trying to be on the forefront of like what's possible, not just with animation on YouTube, but also 3D animation as a whole.
Right.
And I've been very passionate about sort of like pushing the boundaries of what we can do, and eventually getting to a point where we can make something really special. So we're working towards like original IPs and stuff like that, and bringing some real talent to the studio that I think would like, which has already been happening, by the way. Our studio is incredibly talented.
Hmm.
But to the point where we can just make something that will, I think, hopefully leave a legacy. And that's what every animator wants. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of
That's what
course.
all the artists, yeah, all the artists are going for the same thing. But that's me. And
Awesome.
I'm really just I'm a YouTuber. I stream on Twitch every now and then.
Awesome.
Other than that,
Yeah, and before we get into the whole interview, I definitely wanted to mention that Dylan was actually very recently interviewed on the Andrew Price podcast, and I think that everyone here should definitely check that out because it goes into a lot of detail about how Dylan got into animation, how he got into art, how he got into forming the studio, and got into a position where he's able to do this full time and sustain himself and the rest of the studio off of it. I think it's really inspiring, and I would definitely recommend everyone here check that out as well. But I think,
hey,
yeah, today I think I would like to specifically focus talking about 3D anime and Goo Engine,
yes,
which is
yes,
amazing. I use it all the
thank
time.
you, thank you. I'm glad.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah,
so yeah, let's kind of dive into that and the current state and the future of 3D anime. Does that sound good?
I'm totally down for that. Let's do it.
Hell yeah. So I guess kind of just to start off with, you recently released I believe it's called Nameless Road, the Genshin Impact Animation, you and your studio.
Yes.
What, how would you say the production went on that overall, and what were the biggest takeaways from that experience?
So the production itself went pretty well, all things considered. We didn't have a whole lot of time to make it. We only had 8 weeks to do
Oh
it,
wow.
and that was sort of the hardest part, is like getting it done, really.
Yeah.
But like all things considered, it was very very smooth. I mean, we animated faster than we usually do in a way that wasn't too demanding. I think like
Yeah.
I personally ended up animating like half the video or more. Um,
Wow. It's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. So we had a lot of work being done on the project itself at all times. We had a great team of modelers who were helping out with the assets, and I did a lot of the look dev and stuff like that. But by the end of it, I think we learned everything we needed to learn to really solidify all the research we've been doing, and
Mm,
applying it to a project that really really works, as a standalone piece. Um, yeah, so like the research that we've been doing involves, figuring out how do we get Goo Engine, in production? How do we get
right.
the shaders that we need for the characters? How do we get the characters to look good? How do we get the environment to look good? And we've been researching that over, the course of about 2 years with a bunch of really talented individuals. And we haven't really been able to utilize those pieces of tech that we developed, and also new
Mm,
techniques that we developed specifically for a human anime 3D anime production until now, and it really culminated into something special. I think like Genshin Impact Nameless Road was our first like hallmark success of like this is like the baseline of what we can do, right? Like,
definitely.
it's
Yeah.
it's
Absolutely.
already really good, but like I can tell you, straight up, we can definitely do better, and that makes me really excited because I think it does look really good already.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, so biggest takeaways are sort of like, understanding that we can do it, first of all, as a really big accomplishment, and also that the techniques and stuff that we learned are practical, which is great.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's kind of
Yeah.
what I love about that project so much is that it really feels like there was no wasted effort. It's like there was a tight deadline and you put it exactly where it needed to go. It's just like the story, it just reads. The choreography is amazing as usual. It's just, it turned out phenomenal. So yeah.
Thank you.
That kind of leads me to something else I wanted to ask was just like, I guess with this project and just going in the future, like what are the biggest challenges, like trying to nail that anime look in 3D and just trying to get like that feel to work?
I mean, what's interesting is like a lot of people when they talk about 3D anime, like we can talk about that for a long time because there's a lot of already existing schools of thought about shaders and models, which are all already very important. So like getting the models to look good, getting the shaders to look good and dynamic is also very important. And so like those are the baseline things that I would say are definitely important. But not a lot of people talk about animation. And I think that's something that's worth talking about because it's actually very easy to make animation look too 3D and ruin the sort of 2D experience. And that's something that, you know, it's like it may not be as important as the rest, but it's like something that I think does get glossed over a little bit. So we could talk about that because I think like people talk about mixed frames, for example. Mixed frames are pretty good. They're not like, I don't think the end all be all solution that people think it is, but like
mixed frames. I'm not sure what that is actually. What is that?
Yeah, good question. So mixed frames is basically when you don't do 24 FPS. You don't do
okay. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, you don't animate on ones, and you don't animate on twos either. That's the other thing. You animate on ones, twos, and threes, and fours.
Okay.
And you mix up the frame rate dynamically, and that's what basically people in anime just do that. Like 2D animators have done that for a long time, and 3D animators. There's been times where they just think in order to mimic the 2D experience, you just spline it and then bake it out on twos, and then set it to constant interpolation, and then that reduces the frame rate exactly to 12 FPS, and it doesn't actually work. Like it doesn't look good. You might think it might look okay for like a clip or maybe 2 clips or maybe 10 seconds, but a whole movie, no, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
30 minutes, not going to work. That's the whole reason why Dragon Prince and even like some scenes from Genlock and stuff have a lot of comments about how it looks like a PS2 cinematic or something. Right. That's where a lot of the sort of the cheapness comes from, that because it is a cheap effect and it's not something that I would recommend if you want it to not look cheap.
Yeah.
But it's a good example of like how animation can make a big difference. You can have the perfect shaders, but if the animation isn't good, it will still not read exactly like you want it to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's like a whole topic because animation is a big thing, but it's something that I feel like people don't talk about enough.
Definitely.
Other than that, of course, yeah, there's models and shaders. So models and shaders are just like you want to have good shaders that feel flat and dynamic and not painted on.
Right.
My VTuber has painted on shadows, and it's not great. It works, but like
it works.
If I had to do anything else besides just like stand here and talk to you, it would look bad.
Right. Yeah, I get what you're getting at. Right.
Yeah. So it works in this limited case. But I do think like if you want to actually have good shaders, like Goo Engine has a lot of features that would allow for that to happen. That's sort of our main priority with Goo Engine.
Definitely.
And then we have a lot of custom add-ons and tools that we use on top of that to get the other things working well. So like the models, for example, we have camera keys that we're going to be working on. We have like a bunch of animation tools. We have like the rendering tools and stuff that are like separate from Goo Engine itself, like After Effects as well. There's a whole compositing workflow. But yeah, I mean that's the gist of things. I would say like a quick summary of what 3D anime needs. But feel free to ask questions.
No. That's I love hearing this stuff. It's so fascinating to me. I think what you said about specifically about like having animation that like works and feels 2D or like it just feels good. That is like very underappreciated because you can have like the perfect shaders, the perfect outlines, like everything's working marvelously, but if the animation quality like isn't there, people can tell and it'll just like feel off. I think that's actually because Arcane, for example, like they nailed the compositing and like getting that to feel painterly. But the real reason that show works so well is they have like some of the best animators on the planet working on that show, and everything is just so clean and so hand keyed, and you can just feel it in every shot, in my opinion. So yeah, that's awesome.
I totally agree. They, I mean, Arcane looks and feels good because the movement is good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the art style is very unique and it's very well executed.
Yeah.
But it's also like it is something that just looks pretty because there's pretty artists working on it. Like if it looked different, I think it would probably still do well, just quite
Yeah,
frankly,
definitely.
because the animation is so good. Yeah.
Definitely. And that kind of leads me into like looking at what other pieces of media are doing right now, is like Arcane or maybe Trigun Stampede. Like, are there any improvements, innovations, or features that for like 3D anime that if Blender or Goo Engine had them would just be like totally game changing? Or do you think that that's kind of like a ways off?
Hmm. Well, I think the screen space effect shader is already huge.
Yeah,
That's
totally agree.
something. It's something that we have in Goo Engine that no
Yeah.
one else has. I would say, generally speaking, I personally, with no bias at all, believe that Goo Engine is the best software for rendering anime at the moment.
I agree.
It is incredibly streamlined for that specific purpose. And I've seen behind the scenes of like sort of workflows for like how other 3D anime might be done, and it's very, very hacky because the 3D
Mm,
software will not actually support most of what they want to do.
right.
And so there's a lot of like really, really custom tools that work, but maybe overcomplicated. There's also tools that are like only in 2D, right? Like they render out a simple flat pass and then they do the shading by hand. That happens a lot too.
Oh God.
Um,
Wow.
yeah, which is like for a 2D studio that uses 3D as a base, it's great because they already
Yeah.
have the expertise necessary for it. But for us, we're primarily a 3D studio. We can't do that. And it does help, cut down on costs, arguably, because we're not hiring a team of in-betweeners, right?
Right.
Um, Stuff like that. So it's like there's a lot of things that Goo Engine already does better than most software out there. And I really think the big thing, of course, is that first of all, Goo Engine's super young. It's only been around for a couple months now,
Right.
publicly. And there's no workflow for it in the industry. But for me, like our workflow, I think is really, really good in being able to achieve the things that we want to achieve. And I think there's going to be other studios who are like, hey, actually, that's pretty close to what we want to achieve too.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and that would generate some interest. And I think I'm planning to have some conversations, hopefully, with some people who might be interested in integrating Goo Engine in their workflows.
That's
Because
amazing. Yeah.
yeah,
Would you say like the goal of Goo Engine overall is like you want to completely cut out compositing ideally?
no.
No? Okay.
It's an interesting question though, because there definitely is a lot of benefits to doing that specifically. Like cutting
Mm,
out compositing helps a lot with like speed workflows, like even like being able to see things in real time. Like it's
right.
huge. So that's really, really good. But I don't think it's the purpose of Goo Engine per se,
Hmm.
especially since compositing as a whole is a really important process beyond just the placement of layers. Um, there's a whole artistic process behind compositing, which I think is also very important. Um, so we wouldn't cut it out, no. But I do think it would be important to be able to minimize it and make it as efficient as possible because
Right.
compositing takes a lot of time. It also, by the way, takes up a lot of storage space.
Yeah,
Not a
yes
lot of
it
people
does.
talk about this. Yeah. Every image sequence is a whole new set of images, a whole new set of PNGs, each of which are at least 6 MB or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's like you're going to end up with, terabytes of storage for just to have an extra layer that only has like the hair in it. And it's like,
Mm,
that's ridiculous, right? Like it's not
yeah.
super scalable. So like generally Goo Engine is made specifically to make it possible for smaller and smaller studios to make bigger and bigger projects,
Mm,
um and that's sort of the main focus. I think like for us specifically, because it really at the end of the day, the main focus of Goo Engine is for us to use it, right? Like
right, definitely.
what releasing it to the public and having you guys try it out and use the features in a way that you guys can enjoy is sort of like a bonus of that. Because like we update the fork for us, like at the end of
Right.
the day. We update the fork so we can use the new features in Blender. And that's why I think it's such a great symbiotic relationship because like, having people who use the engine and love the engine and want to see it continue to develop, can really also help support this continued development because we do have constantly people working on making it better and better and better. Um, that's only, we need support for that, that's
Right.
just a kind of great way to have like a good way to share it and have people enjoy the features that we've added because we've added a whole lot of things that, um, I think would be really cool to have even in native Blender. But
Yeah, definitely. That
yeah,
actually that reminds me, like, is there anything that's, because I think one of the coolest parts about Goo Engine is that it is kept up to date, because it directly benefits the studio to keep it up to date, because there's new features coming in all the time that are just like, oh my god, I wish I had this. Is there any like Blender feature in particular that's in the pipeline that you're like, god, I can't wait to have this in Goo Engine because this is gonna be helpful?
Well, I can't say anything that's recent that will be coming out soon, but I saw the animation overhaul and I want that.
Oh god, yes.
Yeah. That's going to be huge. And like, yeah, I mean, we have a lot of future plans for Goo Engine that all involves, compatibility with native Blender. So it's like, that's something that like we have to have, absolutely. So like we are in a unique position where we're updating it because we need it. Whereas most forks are just updated once and then maintained for a bit.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, animation overhaul is going to be huge. I think that's I can't even imagine how much nicer it'll be once that happens. Like, yeah,
definitely. There's like, I don't think that this is something that they specifically brought up, and I think this is like this one weird thing. I think this is something you hear a lot when people like transition from one software to the other. Like, I came from Source Filmmaker, and in that program, it's not great, but in that program, there's a very specific feature that it basically treats all animations like they're a Premiere timeline, where you can like make a new clip and just press a button, and all animations from the previous clip are like independent. And like that workflow, you can make like an entire music video in like a sitting, or like a third of one. It's like, it speeds things up so much. That's like my dream feature. I don't know if it's ever going to happen, because I don't know if enough people like even know about that or care. But
yeah,
reading that blog post was like amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we already have the NOA editor, which has action strips, which is kind of similar, but it sucks.
Yeah,
like,
I was about to say, but it's like, oh.
Yeah, I used it in the last production, actually. I did use it for Genshin.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, I added some layered animation to a run cycle, and that was pretty easy to do with the NOA editor. But, like, man, like that, nobody else on the team knows how to use it. So, like...
Really? Wow, that says something, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's not a great piece of tech. I talked to Brad Clark a little bit about it, because he's the guy in charge of basically overhauling the NOA editor.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, at the Blender conference, and he was like, he had a lot of great ideas at his talk. Of just like, yeah, we're just gonna make this, we're gonna make this better, and we're gonna make this better. I'm like, yes, make that better, please. So many things that are just like, yeah, I think in the future it'll definitely be there, but
that's awesome.
We'll see.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. I did not know that. That's fantastic. Because it just feels like so. It's not bad, but it feels really like it's not clear what you're doing and how it's influencing everything around it. And it's like, it's from a usability standpoint.
No, it's terrible.
Yeah,
it's terrible. It's really bad. Like, it's not. I don't know a single person who actually uses it.
I actually have a friend who has used it multiple times, and I was like, "What? How did you do this?" And they kind of like explained it to me a little bit, but it's like, I would not recommend it. I would not recommend it.
No, the entire user interface needs an overhaul, and like, how things, it's
definitely. Yeah. So, this is something I want to ask like every animator I ever interact with at some point, and I have in the past, or I will continue to do this, because it's like the most political question you can ask an animator.
Right-click select. Sorry.
No. Do you actually use right-click select?
I do.
Oh my god, really?
I'm a proponent of right-click select.
Wow.
I think it is very, very good.
I'm so sorry you have that opinion. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. Wow. But what I was actually curious about is like, what is your opinion on motion capture and using mocap in productions?
Oh, yeah, I think it's great. Now, I do think it's something that should be used smartly.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, like, so we've used mocap in the past. The way we've used mocap, we use mocap at Rooster Teeth. We use mocap at the studio. I used it on Project Legendary, for example. That was an old project of mine. But like the way you use mocap differs a lot. Like the way I use mocap differs a lot as well. When it comes to sort of like, if you want to use it in a way that's still true to like being an animator, if that makes sense, right?
No, definitely.
That's where the politics kind of comes from. It's like, are you actually animating if you're mocapping stuff?
Yeah.
And like the way, first of all, I would say this. if you're using mocap straight from the data and like you're just using that for realistic motion and you're using that for like a lot of games use it for, like the actors will act it out and they just do it. And you could argue like in Avatar, for example, The Way of Water and like other things, like mocap is being used exactly the way it's supposed to, which is like a one-to-one translation of real life.
Right.
And that's a really good use case of it. That's great.
Yeah.
Like if you're using the data straight and you want to record in 120 FPS and you want to use all of those frames, you're gonna be good, right?
Yeah.
But like for us, we use stylized animation. Like we've always done stylized animation. So like our animation is not supposed to feel super real.
Right. Yeah.
So we do use mocap, but we use it sparingly, and we use it at times like as like, for example, just so you know, Genshin Impact Nameless Road, no mocap at all. That was all
Okay.
100% hand keyed, right?
Right.
And like the important thing, of course, is that you should be able to do that regardless if you use mocap or not. If you want to be an animator, like you
Yeah.
should be able to hand key everything.
Definitely.
I wouldn't use it as a crutch, but mocap can speed things up. So it's definitely something that like if you need to use it, you should use it. So it's like, and I say that while our fastest production didn't use it at all, but ultimately, like if we were to use it, there'd be certain things where it's like if the way I use mocap personally is I don't use the data.
Mhm.
I'll record the data and I'll put the data in the scene with me, and I'll see a skeleton with the movement, but I will animate side by side with it. So I will animate the mocap from scratch as if I'm animating by hand, but I'll use the poses as 3D reference. So
Yeah. That makes sense.
all it is reference. So like
Yeah.
the way I use it is basically as if someone's using a 2D reference, but now you just have every dimension that you need
Yeah.
instead of having to make up the third dimension in your head and trying to figure out how to interpret the 2D footage in the right way. Now you just see what the poses are, and you're like, oh, cool.
That's smart.
I can use that as reference. I can work a little faster, just like most references is. I talked a bit about this on stream, where it's like, how do you animate faster? And the answer is always, just don't mess up.
It's just
Right.
that easy.
It's just that easy. Just don't mess up. Like if you animate the right thing the first time, you don't have to do it a second time.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're 2 times faster, 3 times faster.
Yeah.
But of course, that's hard to do. But like it comes from experience, right? Experience, you can make the right decisions more and more. But when you use reference, that's also kind of the same thing. When you use reference, you force yourself into a shortcut of doing the right thing because you actually know what it's supposed to look like.
Right.
And so 2D reference does that exact same thing. When you use 2D reference, you're not just making it better, you're also making it better faster than if you just did it by trial and error.
Yeah.
Right. Nobody thinks about that because it's like, oh, like how long would it take you to do that without reference? Like maybe an extra week. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Yeah. That's so true.
it just depends. So it's like reference is kind of a shortcut as well. It's just kind of like, and so in that sense, it's like mocap is being used in our studio in the same way. It's like we're using mocap to speed up the animation workflow because we're just using it to choose the right poses. Where the poses, you can look at it and be like, oh, hey, like actually, because it's mocap, it's already balanced for you, right? You already know where the center of mass is. You already know that like these poses work in real life because they are in real life. And so in the same way that you're using reference in 2D, we're using reference in 3D, and we get these poses that help speed up a couple things. And like everything else is still handcrafted. We only use it as reference. We'll tweak it. We'll edit it. We'll be like, okay, we want it to be like this instead of that, but we'll use it as a base, and it helps. It helps a lot.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
No, go ahead.
I think it's important to be. Well, yeah, I was gonna close off with like, I think it's important to be open-minded about mocap, but I do think it's bad if you're dishonest about it, right? Like at the end of the day, anybody who claims that they're an animator when they're using mocap by itself without any like edits or anything like that, and being like, "Oh, I cleaned up the mocap and I'm a good animator." It's like, I can totally understand why that would rub people the wrong way because it's like
definitely
you don't really understand the principles if you're not able to recreate that yourself.
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'm curious because I'm personally a big fan of like the first 3 RWBY volumes. Like how was mocap utilized on that production overall? Because I think you worked on like volume 3, if I'm remembering correctly.
That's correct. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I worked on volume 3, and mocap was used pretty extensively throughout the production because it speeds up a lot of things. And we would basically use it straight from we would use it as data, but we would clean it up significantly. And like,
interesting.
It wasn't just cleanup, but it was like an extra stylization on top of that. So in certain cases, we would have mocap and then we'd throw half it away because it wasn't
Interesting. Yeah.
wasn't gonna work. Yeah. So like another example is like we use mocap as like a stitching mechanism. So like
Yeah.
for the fight scene in Volume 3, the very beginning, it was one of the first fights I did in Volume 3. We did Yang versus Arslan, and like that was technically mocap, but it was using mocap only for specific moves, kind of like a
Hmm.
movie clip editor, where you put mocap one after the other, and then you stitch together a fight scene that kind of works, but you're
Huh.
doing it creatively in a way that you still have to figure out how they fit together. You're still animating those parts. You're still animating like the things around it and coming up with the choreography yourself. But
Huh.
mocap can help speed that up. And Shane and Monty have used that in the same way. They sort of like use mocap as a shortcut to putting their ideas on paper. Um,
Mm.
so that's a really good way to use it as well, I think, because you're not using it straight either. You're
Yeah.
just like you're understanding what needs to be done and you're using a shortcut to get there, but you're also making it yourself.
Yeah, that's surprising because like if I
Yeah.
think of like a RWBY fight scene, some of them are like so crazy over the top that you wouldn't even
Yeah.
like expect that to even be a
Oh
part of
yeah.
the process. Like it wouldn't be worth it.
Well, it's really interesting when you compare different RWBY fight scenes because it depends on who does them. Like at the end
Yeah.
of the day, like Monty's choreography is incredibly like it's amazing. But
God,
you'll be
yeah.
surprised to see when you watch Monty's choreography, like a lot of the stuff he does is actually relatively grounded. Like he actually has like a lot of really cool complex choreography with like physics and stuff built into the human armatures, right? Like in other words, like
Mm.
it could be done by a human in some way, but like he emphasizes that and pushes it even further into
Mm.
stylization. But he doesn't go quite as far as like sometimes what I do. Like for example, like Avatar: The Last Catbender, like
Right.
that none of that's mocap, right? Because
Right.
we can't have two guys flying around the sky, fighting in literal midair. Like Shane did an amazing fight with the finale between Korra and Aang
Mm.
inside of the Avatar sphere, and they're fighting. They're both floating, but they're using martial arts, and like that's a really cool thing that you can't capture with mocap. You
No.
can't do that. And he did that all by hand, and it was a great scene, and it was like a really really cool piece of choreo. And that's an example of like how that would work. But like, yeah, it just depends on it can affect how it looks at the end. It can also affect your choreo and what you have
Yeah.
as options, and obviously it will affect how fast you make it.
Awesome. That this
Yeah.
kind of reminds me. I don't know if you've ever seen like the Fortnite emotes that they've been releasing recently or anything like
Yeah.
that. But I
Yeah.
actually did a few months ago. I did an interview with Epic Games, and I was
Oh,
able to.
nice.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I was able to talk to one of the like lead animators they have at Epic, and I was curious, like, do you guys use motion capture? Because I saw some stuff online that kind of pointed towards it, but it feels really hand keyed. And
Mm.
what he basically told me was that yes, we do use motion capture in some of our recent stuff, but it's basically just for reference, and oftentimes it
Mm.
actually ends up being more work than if we didn't use motion capture, but it's more accurate a lot of the time to like
Yep.
because a lot of the time it's like they're like actually licensing out these dances. They're not just like taking them because that didn't end well last time. They got sued.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're actually like bringing people into the studio with a motion capture suit, and they're like getting the exact choreography and using that as like a
Wow.
reference point. So yeah, that's really
Wow.
interesting to hear that.
Yeah, I would totally agree with him. I think like there is just so much data in a mocap session that like most of the time using it straight is actually going to cost you more time to clean up than just using it as reference, in my
Right.
experience.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
there and I'm just curious, like have you been watching Trigun Stampede?
I have watched the first episode. I haven't caught up yet.
Oh, it's so
Yeah,
good. It's
I
so
know.
good.
I know. It looks amazing.
Yeah. Have you watched
Yeah.
the other Studio Orange stuff much?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I watched Hoseki no Kuni. I didn't watch Beastars, but
Oh,
I really,
really? Wow.
yeah. I didn't get to watch Beastars yet.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
some amazing choreography in Seki no Kuni too. Oh my god.
Oh
So
yeah,
good.
yeah. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any like because we're talking about like 3D shows, is there any like games you kind of look to as a source of inspiration animation wise?
Animation wise,
Yeah.
not shading wise, right?
Yeah, just specifically animation. Well, yeah, let's say both. Let's say both.
I mean, shading's obviously going to be Guilty Gear.
Of course. Yeah, that's a good one.
So, yeah. Guilty Gear, Grand Blue Fantasy, Dragon Ball.
Yeah.
It's all Arc System work. So, um,
Killing it.
what they do is great. A lot of people are talking about Hi-Fi Rush too, and I've
Oh
seen some pretty cool
yeah,
stuff about
yeah.
Hi-Fi Rush. Yeah, yeah. But for animation, that's a really good question because I I would say a lot of fighting games have really, really good animation reference and
Mm,
choreo.
yeah.
Really creative combos and stuff. Like, I just can't name one off the top of my head, but like if I were to, I'd probably just say the most recent Street Fighter because like they have
Mm,
um the newest version. I think I don't know if it's out yet, but like
no, it's
is it
not.
6?
I
Yeah.
think it's 6. Yeah.
Uh, but I saw a friend of mine was playing the beta, and I was like, this looks so good.
Yeah. It looks amazing.
Yeah,
It's so cool.
yeah. So like those kinds of games will typically have some of the best like action choreo that you could probably use as reference that don't really get a chance to shine in like film and animation because
No.
like in games they really just like spend time and refine choreo pieces to be like really, really, really well done and really creative because you see them 100 times. That's the, kind of the whole point.
Yeah.
So they want that to really land and stick and be good and memorable, and they do a really good job at that. Turns out, and
Yeah.
I think the animation industry can learn a lot from the choreos because like Monty and Shane, they actually use fighting games as reference quite a bit as well.
Oh, really?
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, in the past, like there's just been like a lot of like inspiration from these like amazing fighting game combos that you just don't see in like film and media
Yeah,
type
no.
things. Yeah.
It's awesome. And you kind of went into this in the Andrew Price podcast episode a little bit, but I would love for everyone here to hear like kind of like what kind of advice do you have to people who are interested in creating their own IPs, maybe creating their own studio, or just doing their thing, their artistic thing, like full time as a career, like and sustaining yourself? Like, what avenues do you think are worth looking into? I guess we'll stick to animation because that makes the most sense. Like, what
Hmm.
kind of avenues to make that like more realistic and more possible? I guess like how do you build to that point? I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's a very similar answer to what I gave Andrew because basically,
Mm.
when you are an independent animator and you want to stay independent, for example, if you want to, then you're gonna have to figure out a way to make money.
Yeah.
And like that's the biggest thing. Is like how are you gonna build a brand? How are you gonna make money? And the thing I recommend to most people is to start with fan art. And like not
Mm.
everybody wants to do that because at the end of the day, they want to build their own IPs and stuff like that. But like whether you're working on fan art on your own and you're doing this stuff and trying to make a name for yourself there, or if you're working on the official, like franchises because they hired you as a freelancer or something like that, you're ultimately going to have to start out working on other people's stuff. And I think
Yeah.
like being okay with that is pretty important. Um, it's a pretty important aspect of like accelerated growth because if you try to start from total zero and try to make everything like perfect, like your first ever project is going to be like an original anime series
Yeah.
that's going to like blow everyone out of the water. It's like it's not going to happen. Or if it does happen, it'll happen several decades down the road.
Yes.
um, because that's just how it works. I think like if you want to build a name for yourself, you have to have an audience. If you want an audience, you have to build a name for yourself.
Yeah,
So it's like
exactly. It's so much easier to just like get people to look at something if it's attached to something they already know in some way, right?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And generally speaking, it's like from a business perspective, and even from like a like an artistic perspective, like a business artistic perspective, it's like you want to compete at the end of the day. You need to
Yeah.
compete in order to survive. And this is specifically if you are, in a independent space like YouTube, for example, because it's so competitive, you have to be okay with that. And that's not something that everybody is going to be okay with because it's really, really, really hard
Yeah.
to compete with literally billions of seconds of footage uploaded every like minute or whatever it is. It's like it's crazy.
Yeah.
And so you have to figure out a way to stand out, and you have to figure out, a way to put yourself in front of an audience. The best way to do that is to yoink and twist, right? Is the old saying from Ludwig. Um, but you yoink and twist. So you take something that exists that people are familiar with,
Hmm.
and then you give it a spin that makes it unique to you.
Hmm.
And then you let that out into the world, and hopefully people will see that it's special in some way.
Yeah, that's kind
And
of what
will
you did with like the Katsuwatch stuff, right?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, right? So Katsuwatch was like, this is something that people are familiar with, but it's going to be done in my way. And eventually I sort of transformed that into like, we're going to add more fights to this. Now people
Mm.
understand, oh, I'm a fight animator. Oh, we're going to start doing some more human characters, Overwatch characters as humans instead of cats. Now people know it's still Overwatch, but I can do humans as well. I can do human fights. I can do
Mm.
all these things. Zenyatta Unleashed did very well, for example. Like that was a human fight animation I did where Zenyatta decided to stand up on his two legs and start fighting with them.
Right.
And like people really enjoyed that, but it's like, that was an evolution from the cat stuff, and like ultimately being able to build that audience and build that audience for my stuff more so than just Overwatch stuff is the path that you ultimately have to go in. And there's different ways to do it. Like, I've been animating for like almost 10 years now. And it's taken me a long time just to get to this point, right? And like, is it the fastest? Like, I don't know. I think you probably do it faster, right? Like,
Maybe.
there's probably ways you could do it faster. There's probably ways you could be more efficient about it. I do think personally that like if you work in the industry and got some connections in that way, and like it might be a totally different path, but you could eventually form your own studio. Like at the end of the
Yeah.
day, like Miyazaki and like like a lot of the like big like Madhouse producers like Matt, they're at Mappa now and stuff. Like they just worked at a studio, and then they're
Right.
just like, we're gonna make our own studio now,
Right.
with Blackjack and
Right.
the other thing.
So
But yeah,
do you think it's kind of something you have to build? It's like, okay, you got to build up in stages. You have to start by making something that people can latch onto. So because you'll get eyeballs on it, but more importantly, you'll get people's like thoughts on it and opinions,
yes,
and you can kind of
yeah,
grow from, oh, people like this, but they like this less, and you can kind of just grow from that.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the experience is really important because you get feedback on how to improve your own compass on what is marketable and what will do well.
Right.
Because like when you make your own IPs, it's here's something I will say that like I think a lot of artists probably need to hear, even though it might not be like super fun to hear. But like if you make an IP just for yourself and just because you like it, that's great. That's the goal, I think, definitely. But if you're not thinking about who you're going to sell it to, like well, not sell it to, but who you're going to market it to, like who's
Right.
going to watch this? If you're
Right.
not thinking about who's going to watch that show or that IP, um, it probably won't exist.
Right.
Like it probably won't get funded. It probably won't be like you could self fund it. That's great, but like it most likely will fail. And that's just sort of like because you're not able to think about the long term success of the project.
Right.
Um, and understanding what is marketable does not come natural. You have to sort of understand that over
Yeah.
a couple of iterations, right? You have to experience like what do people actually like, like what is good, and we've gotten that experience just through making stuff for YouTube for almost 10 years now.
Yeah, that's what I
Um,
really liked that you brought up, or maybe it's Andrew, one of you two, brought
yeah,
up during that podcast episode was the idea that if you like, because artists always think of like, oh, monetization, oh, it's bad, it's evil in some
yeah,
way. It's like
yeah,
it's not real art if you're monetizing it. But the reality is that the world we live in, if you're able to monetize something and you're able to make a decent chunk of money off of it by being smart, by like exploring different revenue options, making courses or whatever it takes, like
mhm,
that allows you to pour more time into your craft, and you're going to get better at your craft faster and be able to
yeah,
spend more time in it. That's just kind of how it works. And I think you are the one who said that, like, it's fine if you don't want to monetize your work. That's great. You just have to know that's going to be a hobby. And there's nothing wrong with being a hobby, of course,
yeah,
but you should know that.
yeah. Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think it's a very important thing to realize that if you want to go into starting a business without thinking about the money, you're not starting a business.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's fine. Like no one, like you
Yeah.
don't have to start a business. Like it's fine. Like it's a whole commitment.
Yeah.
And you can enjoy art perfectly fine without running a business. It's totally okay. But yeah, that is ultimately the trade off.
Definitely.
When it comes to money though, it's interesting because like for me, there is obviously like a line to draw when it comes to like what is what is okay to think about and what is not okay to think about when it
Yeah.
comes to money, right? Like for me, I do prioritize money, but I don't sell out for money, if that makes sense, right?
No, yeah.
Like sell out is a very sort of a derogatory term, and it's like I do think that there's good reasons for people to do stuff for money, and it's fine. But like I personally have like a hard line to draw where it's like, if I'm doing something that I know that I won't enjoy, and
Yeah.
they're paying me a lot of money for it, I probably won't care about the money.
Yeah.
I'll be like, no. Like for me, there's a certain level of confidence that I have to be able to do that though, because my decision making process is specifically, I I don't care about that money because I will believe in myself that I can make money in other ways that are more aligned with my interests.
Yeah, definitely.
and that's a hard decision to make, because if you're presented with, like a bunch of money and it's like really enticing, and it's like, oh well, but I'm not going to enjoy it. It's like, that's a hard decision to make.
Mm,
But I think as an artist, if you can make that decision, if you can understand, well, okay, well, how can I make money doing something that I do love doing, and keep that in mind, then you will hopefully be able to avoid falling into that, pitfall, essentially, right?
definitely. And I love you sharing this because I think that it's something that's so important for artists to hear, especially right now. I feel like so many, it's just like a mindset right now. It's like that monetization is somehow like bad or evil, but it's just not.
It's not better evil.
It's just part of
Yeah.
the way it works right now, and there's nothing evil
Yeah.
about it. You can
Well,
sell
let's
out, but yeah.
yeah, let's be very clear, right? There are times where money making can be dishonest,
Yeah.
and we should make sure that it's clear. Like, don't be dishonest,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like when we provide products, we provide products that we genuinely believe have value.
Yeah.
Like, I think Mesh Trails is honestly one of the best add-ons for VFX in Blender. I just personally believe that. So, like, yeah, we priced it a little high, and like I've actually made it a bit more accessible recently since the Andrew
That
Price
is
podcast.
not priced very high. You are completely, it is totally worth the value.
Much appreciated. Much appreciated. Yeah, I think it's incredibly valuable. Like,
Yeah.
it is probably one of my favorite add-ons, and we've used it for so many things. By the way, like, we use it in every production
Right.
over and over again, and even for things that you don't think we would actually use it for. It's just a really, really good tool. And so I personally think, like, when we make these things, we're being very honest about, like, the fact that, yeah, this is something that we actually want to help people with. Like, when I'm not trying to be, like, scammy or whatever. Like, that's
Right.
that's ultimately the thing. Like, because let's just be honest. Like, you can be as ambitious as possible as an animator, but if you're gonna, like, sell something that is like, um I don't know how to put it. Like, promote something, like, maybe if you even like promote a product that is unethical, that you don't
Mm,
personally agree with, like, be careful about that stuff, because, like, money can corrupt, absolutely.
mm.
But I don't think money is evil. No, not
Right.
inherently, not at all.
And people just
Um,
kind of like pick up on it. They can tell like when
oh yeah,
someone's selling something that they don't like personally believe in, or if it's just like,
yeah.
oh, this is like, I don't know about this, or
Yeah.
like, and something else that I've seen. Honestly, this is kind of rare because most animators like are perfectionists, but sometimes you can see animators go in the opposite direction where it's like they're making animations for the YouTube algorithm. I don't know if you've ever seen any of these, but like you can
Yeah.
tell it's like maybe they've cared about like the actual like quality of what they're making a little less just because they're trying to make a living from it, and like
Mhm.
strictly through like ads and the YouTube. And it's kind of unfortunate because like the way, and you talk
It
about
is
this in the
unfortunate.
Andrew
Yeah.
Price podcast, like the way YouTube monetization is like it's minutes based, so you just have to keep making stuff and
Yep.
just
Yep.
survive. And it's just, I don't know, it's kind of like unrealistic to expect to make a
Oh yeah.
living off of YouTube just through ad revenue and watch time, I would say.
As an animator, absolutely. As a
Yeah.
vlogger, no, you can make tons of money.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But yeah, like, I do want to say that, like, people who are working to cater to the YouTube algorithm, like, it's hard. Like,
Yeah.
I don't blame them for that, and I think it's pretty respectable that if they're enjoying what they're doing and
Yeah.
they're okay with that quality drop, like, it's okay. I think I have a lot of respect for that kind of grind. It's just, for me, I used to do that because I did that during the Overwatch days, and I cranked out a bunch of videos. Like, it was like, even now, if you look at my YouTube channel, like, I pump
I
out a video.
wouldn't say they're super low quality, but oh,
Fair,
continue.
fair. I will take that compliment, but it's definitely not, like, my best work. And for me,
Mhm.
like, when I was rushing those out, I was like, every video was like, it has to be 3 weeks. Like, I got to
Oh
do it.
God.
I got to do it in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and I killed myself a lot for that kind of like grind. It was like, a lot of physical labor, um, and
Yeah.
uh, and I just felt like I couldn't scale properly with that, and that's
Yeah.
why, like, ultimately I was like, long term, this is not my goal personally, and I wanted to grow and make something even more special, and I wanted to create a team of talented individuals that could really collaborate and I think reach a potential that everyone together can benefit from. Um, and That's where we've been going. But, like, a lot of other people, like a lot of other YouTubers, like, they're making funny skits and they're animating, like, cool videos based on, like, video games and stuff like that. And um I think it's good. Like I think if they enjoy doing that and that's what they're okay with doing like long term, that's great. And it's a job, you know.
Definitely,
It's like it's a real job, and it just depends on what you want to do.
Yeah,
but
I feel like I need to like asterisk. I'm not like calling anyone out by this statement. And
if
you're like if you're doing that, I have a ton of respect for you. I was just like kind of throwing a ball out there because I'm curious.
No, very very good disclaimer, because I just think it's important to note that like there's nothing wrong with that in particular.
No,
it is just unfortunate that like we don't have the luxury as YouTube animators to just create super high quality stuff once a year. You know, it's like
we used to, but we don't anymore.
Yeah, not anymore. No. Yeah, so it's unfortunate, and I think like there's going to be other ways to monetize animation that will be not sort of like as tied to YouTube ad revenue and stuff. Like we talked about merchandising with Andrew. It's like I think a big part of what animation excels at. So that's I mean, just look at your background. I mean, there's a lot of merch. No, it's great because I personally think like those figurines, they only work because they're anime characters. Like,
exactly.
You wouldn't buy one of like The Rock from Jumanji.
right, yeah. And it's like it's cool. That's the fun part about a lot of like the merchandising stuff for animation. It's like I love plushies. I buy those just for the hell of it. So like the idea of like making your own t-shirts, your own like product lines, like that's fun for me. I know that's not like the case for everyone, but like I think that's like an exciting thing to like move into.
Oh yeah. I totally agree. Yeah. And it makes people happy. Like I think that's the other thing. It's like merch is a really good avenue to like give people a solid way to like engage in their favorite show or their favorite entertainment media, while at the same time supporting them. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's like this is something that actually brings happiness into their life. It's like it's. I mean, I'm sure you when you look at your figurine set, like you're just like, this is fucking awesome. Like you know, like this is great. I feel good about this. I think that's important.
I just went to an anime con last weekend, recently, Anime Milwaukee, and just seeing like all the fan art and the charms and the people cosplaying. It's like, it really gives you an energy. It's like, yes, this is why I'm doing this. I love this, the energy from this. It's hard to even put into words. It's like, this is what I want to be a part of. And I love this stuff. I'm just so passionate about it. I would not mind like working on this like 16 hours a day. It doesn't feel like work to me, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I know we are running out of time though. So this has been amazing though. I am so glad we got to have a conversation here. So
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I think just to close it out, just what are the best places people can find you, the studio, and like what are the best ways they can support future work?
Yes. So I mean, right now I'm actually streaming on Twitch every morning, so that's fun. So you can check me out at twitch.tv/Dylan Goo. We go over your animations, everyone's animations. You can submit them and we'll randomly select one in the mornings, and I'll actually do a in-depth animation review.
Awesome.
Yeah, just for
I should
you guys
submit one sometime. That'd be fun.
You absolutely should. It's great. It's actually been a lot of fun. Yeah, and people have been learning a lot, and
it's awesome.
Yeah, if you guys want to submit, it's totally free. You just submit it in the Professor Goo review channel in the Discord.
Awesome.
And we'll just select one every morning. And so I've been doing that every morning at 9 a.m. CST on twitch.tv/Dylan Goo. And then youtube.com/Dylan Goo is, of course, our main YouTube channel where we post all of our finished animations. If you want to learn more technical stuff from me, I also have a Professor Goo channel on YouTube.
Yes. God, I've watched those videos so much. You have no idea. Gold.
Awesome. I'm glad. Yeah.
Awesome. So for everyone watching, all those links will be in the description as well. So anything else? Anything else you'd call out?
Probably Goo Engine.
Yes. It's amazing. Yeah. Go download it. You heard it here first.
yeah. And if you guys want to support us on Patreon, it helps the continued support of the channel and of the development of the software as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Dylan. This is so good. I think this is going to be really helpful to a lot of different artists out there. And it's like, this is the kind of stuff I wish I heard like 4 years ago. So yeah.
that's fair. No, I appreciate it, Crash. This has been awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Dylan. So, all right. Take care.
Cool. All right. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks for watching this whole episode. Make sure to check out Dylan Goo's Patreon and YouTube channel, linked in the description and comments below.
I wasn't able to get into it too much this episode, but I actually use Goo Engine for every animation I'm working on right now. So I would highly, highly recommend you give it a shot. It's completely free if you can buy it yourself, but you can also get access to it on the Dylan Goo Patreon. So yeah, definitely check it out. It's awesome. I think it's the best software for making 3D anime right now. It's really, really good. So, and make sure to check out crashsune.com as we've recently renovated the website, and there's a brand new newsletter you can check out there right now. All right, thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.